Hey everyone, I'm Matt, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. The UFO news keeps coming like a juggernaut. Let me count the ways. We have the UAP Disclosure Act that has been brought back from the dead. Lou Elizondo released his book on UAP, Imminent. You have the upcoming UAP hearings in November, chaired by Congresswoman Nancy Mace. The professional Debunkers' house of cards is collapsing quicker than a junk bond on Wall Street. And the former director of the Pentagon's UAP program, Arrow, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, launched his image rehabilitation tour. And this from filmmaker James Fox.
In 2017, the New York Times published a story exposing a secret government program investigating UFOs.
That story was kind of a catalyst for a lot of things that have happened since. Members of Congress started to ask questions.
Instruments report there is something there.
There are flight characteristics that we can't explain.
UAPs are unexplained. It's true. They need to be investigated.
Here we are having a hearing where just a few years ago, we didn't even acknowledge that these things were real.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
You're telling me people have come forward claiming firsthand knowledge of craft of non-human origin?
That's correct. We have sources who have asserted not only that there have been crashes, but there have been crash retrievals.
Do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
Biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they human or non-human?
Non-human.
I'm sitting here today because the American people are being lied to.
We are the American government, and we are open, and we're going to be open about this.
What has been revealed:
non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity.
Is only part of the story.
The pressure's on. The Pentagon, the CIA, they're going to have to answer the mail.
Some are risking everything.
Have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life?
Yes, personally.
To uncover the rest.
What is being done to verify the assertion that the U.S. government has spaceships of non-human intelligence in their possession?
That kind of revelation unearths people's beliefs.
I would go to jail to say things that I've been exposed to in the program.
Wow. Actually, I think the best part of that whole clip is NASA Director Bill Nelson saying, "We are the government and we are going to be truthful with you." I mean, that is a lie. We know that. The Pentagon and the government, and especially the CIA, they continue to lie to Congress and the American people. But anyway, this film looks absolutely amazing from James Fox, and we are super, super excited to have that out. I think that's going to really move the ball forward. So today we have UK journalist Christopher Sharp, who will be joining us to discuss all the latest UAP developments, and there are a lot. But first, please hit the subscribe and thumbs up buttons on YouTube. Leave a comment and let us know what you think about this episode. You can also find us on social media on X at Good Trouble Show and everywhere else at The Good Trouble Show. I keep calling it Twitter, actually. Still haven't done the whole X thing. Anyway, you can also find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. And as always, if you would like to help chip in to keep the lights on, we would certainly appreciate that. You can become a Patreon member of The Good Trouble Show by going to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. Sign up and you can support our work. So our guest today is one of the handful of journalists who are actually doing their jobs covering the UAP topic without bias or an agenda. And there aren't too many out there that aren't doing it with some kind of bias or agenda. We know that. So anyway, please welcome the founder and editor-in-chief of the Liberation Times, Christopher Sharp. Chris, how are you, sir?
Hey, man. I'm really, really good, Matt. Really looking forward to chatting with you again on the show. So thanks for having me, and thanks to your audience as well.
No, thank you.
And Ali. Let's not forget Ali.
Oh yes, and yeah, we have a new person part of the person part of the UAP. Well, I can't talk. I'm very tongue tied today. A new team member for the Good at Trouble show to hopefully kind of make things run a little bit smoother here. So her name's Allie, and we're super excited to have her on, and we are always super excited, Chris, to have you back on. I think you've been on this show 20, 30 times now or something like that. It's been a lot. You're a fixture.
Absolutely. We're going to hit a century soon, I think. So no, it's always a pleasure. We've been on this journey since the beginning, and yeah, I can think of no better person to appear alongside other than yourself. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us. How about that trailer from James Fox for the program? Looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yes, it looks extraordinary, and it seems like there's one of your colleagues in there as well, from the UAP Disclosure Fund. I believe a former Senate staffer.
Yeah, correct. So that is who you're referring to is Kirk McConnell. I've known Kirk for quite some time. He was a senior staffer on the Senate Armed Services Committee and has been a fixture in Washington for quite some time, and has been working this UAP topic for quite a long time. He's definitely not someone. He's not like a staffer that is new to the topic or doesn't have the security clearance and all of that. This guy, yeah, he is something else, and he, as you mentioned, he is one of our on our board of advisors for the UAP Disclosure Fund. So I'm curious, what do you think was the most significant revelation in the trailer, other than Kirk McConnell making his first public appearance?
Well, actually, I think it was the fact that he was saying there are first-hand witnesses and whistleblowers. Someone of his background and repute actually saying that is really, really big. Obviously, there are some naysayers who are like, "Oh, it's always, especially Kirkpatrick, the former Arrow director, who are basically saying, look, it's just stories. Someone's heard this, someone's heard that. No one's actually seen anything." Well, actually, what McConnell has said there is that there are actually first-hand whistleblowers and witnesses. I know it's not news to us, but look, someone of his reputation saying that is really, really important. And that's how he hit back against those spreading misinformation, such as the former Arrow director. So it's great to hear. And yeah, there are people, they've seen things, and these aren't just stories that are passed down from one person to another. They have an origin, and yeah, some stuff is going to be coming out soon, probably from some of those people, I suspect.
Yeah, I suspect so. So how have you been in general? I know you've got a family, you've got your day job, and then you've got Liberation Times, and then on top of that, there has been like just a huge amount of UAP news in the past 30 days. Has it been a challenge keeping up with balancing all of that news, work, family, all of that kind of stuff?
Absolutely, certainly. It can be very, very difficult switching off sometimes. I don't want to always be glued to my phone. And, I have some precious years to enjoy with my son and my daughter as they're growing up. And I want to make the most of that time, So you do have to balance it. You do have to put some restrictions to your time, and that's really, really important, getting that balance correct. I'm dealing with babies, as in actual babies, this is my daughter changing her nappies and stuff like that, and I switch on to X, and I'm dealing with other babies on there complaining and saying all this stupid stuff about me. It's fine, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, it can be tough. I mean, for me, I call it a seagull tweeting. So basically what I do, I fly in, I take a big dump, and then I fly off, and then I don't look back. And there are a large number of people that don't like what I do. You have the debunkers who, they're on one end of the spectrum. And then of course you have, people in government, Pentagon, DOD, and NSA, whatnot, that are certainly not fans of me calling them out constantly certainly. But it's it can be hard not to take that kind of like personal criticism, hard to not let it affect you. Like, it's one thing if somebody leaves a comment and says, Matt, you're saying or too much or whatever. I mean, like, that's like good constructive criticism, and I'm always trying to improve. But yeah, I mean, you do have the folks that will comment on your work, and it just comes with the territory. It's I think it was Lou Elizondo that said, you put your head above the trenches, people are going to be taking shots at you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Or in my case, they criticize my accent. He's got such a thick British accent. I don't understand him. Okay. Yeah. But I really do struggle with the ums and stuff, because I've got primary reading epilepsy, which is basically language epilepsy. So do forgive me if I do say sometimes, if I struggle with my words and sentences. But look, yeah, that's fine. In terms of criticizing me personally, that's fine. Let them do that. What's important is the information. Is the information that I'm providing good? And, that's important to me as well. I want to make sure that I'm making the right calls and judgment by putting information out. And, whenever there have been cases whereby new information has come forward, such as the Wisconsin lights, I am so happy to provide that new information. And those are the most important stories that I actually tell, to actually ensure that my audience is actually provided with a full, accurate picture of what is going on. And I think, so far we seem to be making some waves, especially with the Office of Global Access story. I think, since that story came out that we did jointly with Josh, I think that the ramifications have been quite interesting, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I spoke to, I guess it was about, about 3 or 4 months ago, I had dinner with a former, trying to think how to describe this person. This person was in charge of some things at Joint Special Operations Command. I'll say that. And anyway, when I had dinner with this individual said, You guys have no idea of the shitstorm you caused at the CIA, at the Office of Global Access, when you guys outed them. And this person was laughing. This person thought it was high time that this whole UAP crash recovery program being run out of the Office of Global Access under the Directorate of Science and Technology, they have continually lied to Congress and lied to the American people, and they're still lying about it. So anyway, this person from that was in JSOC was very. He was glad we did what we did, and it was time to put them out in the light. I would say.
Absolutely, I've heard similar as well. I heard that after that story came out, someone from the intelligence community basically said, "Well, I guess that's it then. The information's coming out. There's no way of stopping this now." But let's see. Time will tell, but obviously it had an impact, which is what you want from a story. And I'm really, really pleased. If we moved the dial just a little bit forward, then I'm very, very happy.
I totally agree. So let's go over some of the news that has occurred over the past 30 days. Of course, I think probably one of the biggest things is UAP whistleblower Lou Elizondo came out with his long-awaited book, Imminent, that, I loved it. It shot to number 1 almost immediately on the New York Times bestseller list. Chris, how big a deal do you think that book is, or how important is it going to be in terms of moving the ball forward on disclosure, Lou's book, Imminent?
Hugely important, because Lou is probably the most articulate, most charismatic spokesperson for the topic around. And when he does go on these shows in the US, the impact from that is going to be huge. A lot of people are going to be tuning in and actually hearing about this topic for the first time. And Lou is a highly credible person, and I think is going to cause a lot of impact in terms of some of the revelations that he's actually describing within the story. I think it's hugely important. And I found it very, very sobering as well in terms of Imminent. And that's what I kind of focused my story on when I was writing about the book. What does imminent mean? How do we kind of untangle that? So, yeah, and it's quite sobering to think about as well, because it does suggest that something is going to occur which may not be very nice, or we just don't know what it is. Yeah, and I think it really sums up the mystery of UAP, because you got one side that thinks they're all bad, and then you've got another side that thinks they're all good. I happen to think that it's kind of a mixture. Some are bad, some are good, just like humans. But look, yeah, I think, for me personally, it was quite sobering. But I think for a lot of other people that haven't been exposed to the topic before, I think it's going to really rattle them as well. And they're going to get interested in the topic. So I suspect we've had a lot more people on UFO X in the last few weeks because of his impact.
I think so as well. What for you, what was the biggest revelation in Lou's book that may not have been on your radar?
I mean, for me, I generally knew a lot of the details anyhow. I think the baiting of UAP using nuclear materials was very interesting there. I mean, you got me here, but
no, that's okay.
There was something else I wanted to mention. That I just want to say, because there's a lot of people calling into question Lou's legitimacy. And Lou and I, we talk quite a lot, and let's just say, Lou and I, Josh, who I work with, and one other person were having conversations in around Easter time, and what I was exposed to in terms of this other person being very senior, kind of backed up in terms of what I knew in terms of Lou's credentials, and also it kind of underscored to me the fact that there are some highly incredible, competent people who have been in very senior positions within government office that they can talk, they can back Lou up, they can kind of back the UAP topic up as being real and something very important to national security, but they just don't want to go there. They don't want to speak to the media because they've seen what's happened to Lou, they've seen what's happened to Dave and many of the others, and they just don't want to do that to their family. They don't want the abuse. They don't want UFO people that are knocking on their door and just hassling them and their family. And it just kind of really spoke to me in that, this is a really big decision some of these people have got to take. They've got to speak to their wives. They've got to speak to their families before actually speaking to the media, because it's a huge decision to actually go out there. I mean, in this instance, we couldn't get someone to speak to us for the Daily Mail. I won't say anything about this person's identity, but I think that is really important to underscore there in terms of Lou's credibility. He is the real deal.
He is a real deal. And one of the things I think that maybe not surprising, but I was most happy to see out of this was and continues to be the number of really A-list media engagements Lou has been showing up on. He's been on national news. He's been on the Daily Show, tons of stuff, and I know that's going to continue. So it really took this. I think this topic, it really helped take this out of kind of more of the like this show, which has a very specific audience, and we love our audience, but it kind of took it from the folks that are really kind of focused on this to an audience that maybe had never tracked the UAP issue at all. And that I thought was of tremendous value.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I've been watching him on a number of shows, and he just handles all the situations so well when he's asked awkward questions. I saw a podcast the other day when he was being asked about Stephen Greer and what he had said about him previously, and just the way that Lou handled it by asking the podcaster to Google a news story and video on some flares that were shot up off the coast of Florida. That was really interesting. I thought it was great. Not saying that in terms of Stephen Greer, by the way, I don't think that everything he says is nonsense. I think he's come up with some really good information, by the way, as a journalist.
Yeah,
I deal with information. That's my currency. But I think in terms of the attacks on Lou, that was absolutely outrageous. And it just spoke to me of something that's kind of like being hanging over this community for far too long, which is egos and personalities and wanting to be the main person instead of working as a team.
Totally. I mean, that was actually going to be one of my next questions. Were you surprised by the attacks on Lou? I know I wasn't.
No. I think I think we all suspected that there was a disinformation network. Let's say we know who talks to each other. We know who's got grudges and stuff, and so yeah, it was really no surprise to me to see some of the pushback on Lou. But look, Lou is a lovely, lovely person, a fantastic human being. And I don't think he deserves any of that pushback. He's the guy that came out publicly. He put his career on. Well, he actually quit his career. He could have had a very, very good job with a high paying salary with a great pension. He gave that all up. He was living in, I think, a trailer with his wife at one point. And he wasn't getting anything much from this topic. Even when joining TTSA, it wasn't like he was raking much cash or anything like that. And so he's actually probably lost quite a lot from this topic in terms of salary and things like that, really. So where other people haven't gone to that sacrifice that Lou's gone to, and if it wasn't for Lou, we wouldn't be where we are right now. We see the media side of Lou doing at the moment, but look, he makes plenty of trips, as we both know, to Washington DC to actually talk to members of Congress and other government officials to actually ensure that we're making progress on the topic. And I don't think that's appreciated a lot of the time, but for people that do speak to Lou, we realize how engaged he is and what sacrifices he is making and how difficult it is for him.
Yeah, and I'm going to probably talk a little bit more about that in my kind of post show rant, which a lot of people seem to enjoy, hopefully. But yeah, I think that the biggest thing that just made it absolutely clear, it's one thing, I think, if you've got the professional debunkers like Mick West going and constantly trying to debunk UAP videos, like him and Mark von Rennenkamp are constantly going at it over the Tic Tac or Go Fast or whatever. And Mick can, of course, offer up his sort of technical explanations about why it is this maybe isn't real, or is a balloon or a seagull or whatever kind of BS that he comes up with. And hearing that kind of stuff from like the professional debunkers, like Jason Colavito and all of these others, where they're hyper focusing on a particular case. Now, that I can somewhat understand. Now, where I disagree with them is when they get backed into a corner, which Mark has done with people like Greenstreet and Mick. And then when Mick and Greenstreet know that they've been caught with their pants down, they clam up because they know that they have been outed. And so I think it's one thing to debunk cases, and which is why, like on this show, I don't really get into particular cases because, I can't tell if anything is real. I'm not like an analyst or anything like that. But I think the biggest eye opener about people like Mick West and Stephen Greenstreet and Jason Colavito, and there's this other guy who's, I don't know how, has a teaching job at a university here in California, this Luis guy who wrote this thing for Scientific American. But it's one thing to debunk cases. It's a completely different thing when their entire focus is to attack the character of Lou Elizondo and David Grush and these others. Because what it tells you is that it tells you that really in my view, they're frauds. I like to call them the fraud squad. But because these people, they're trying to say, oh, we're unbiased and all of that. And hey, if you want to debunk UFO cases, great. But what they have resorted to is attacking the character of Lou Elizondo, which tells you right there, black and white, they're doing it because they have an agenda. They're likely doing it because they're doing it because someone's telling them to be doing it. It's just, I mean, would you agree? It's like, it's one thing to go after the cases. It's another thing to go after the person, which is what they are doing right now with Lou.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that history won't judge them too kindly. We're already seeing the Havana syndrome, CIA or the intelligence community's position on the Havana syndrome actually unraveling. And many of these same people who have written pieces for Scientific American or actually tried, well, basically, they proved to be useful idiots for the CIA in terms of backing up this kind of like mass psychological delusion that everyone's suffering from in terms of Havana syndrome, that one person says that they're ill. Oh yeah, I feel ill as well. And this is kind of like this effect happening, this cascading effect. It's crazy. And it seems to be orchestrated. And obviously you've got Dan Vergano there, who's the opinion editor of the Scientific American. Very, very interesting guy. Used to work in the Pentagon, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, he used to work in the Pentagon. I think he was an aerospace engineer. And then in early 2000, like the early noughties, he just decided, okay, I've had enough of doing this in the Pentagon. I'm going to now be a journalist. And suddenly, like, he's kind of like helping the intelligence community with all these stupid kind of opinion pieces backing up their stances and propaganda on Havana syndrome and UAP as well. I mean, don't forget that the UAP topic is very, very closely aligned to the Havana syndrome topic in terms of how the intelligence community is actually handling it, kind of misleading Congress, misleading the public, putting out these public reports, which just get parroted by mainstream media, who just kind of like swallow it up without asking any questions. Same with the UAP stuff as well. So, I mean, now that the whole Havana syndrome topic is unraveling for the government, now that we know, that we've learned about the studies that were kind of like tainted and all the biases and the evidence of Russian involvement, now, you know, we can actually say to members of Congress, look, you can, you know, look right here, Havana syndrome. This is kind of like proof that the intelligence community have been lying to you. They've been lying to the public. And you trust them on UAP? How can you do that? You know, you have to have transparency. And currently, unfortunately, it seems that the government doesn't want to do its job. It doesn't want to hold these rogue actors within the intelligence community and within the DAD accountable. Obviously, you can't say the whole of the government. You know, I think that there are certain individuals who have held legislation up in terms of the UAP Disclosure Act, for example. And frankly, I think some of these people, some of these politicians are compromised by the intelligence community.
And we're going to... Yeah, sorry. We're going to get into the act in a little bit, but yeah, it's clear the whole thing is so corrupt. You cannot trust the Pentagon, and you know that. We'll save this to when we get to the legislation. But yeah, we're going to really dig into that one. But what I want to move on to is your recent article about the drone incursions, and your recent article was titled "Witness Statements Reveal Alarming Drone Incursions Over Langley Air Force Base as Drone Busters Failed to Intercept Objects." So my first question is, this whole thing some kind of sequel to Ghostbusters with Bill Murray? You've got Drone Busters, you've got Ghostbusters. Are they related at all?
Good question. Yeah, it looks like that. I think they did used to call them Ghostbusters. I've heard them referred to as that before. But yeah, all credit to my friend Kyle, who actually managed to get the scoop on that. I mean, he's relentless when it comes to Freedom of Information Act requests, and he's forever working, making sure he can get as much information as possible. And I think he had sent that one to me some time ago, but I didn't get around to reading it. And then suddenly when I read it, I'm like, what? This is incredible. Like, Kyle, like, what you found is incredible. I called him up straight away. And yeah, we're able to report on, you know, the logs from the security forces from those events. And yeah, it just kind of like deepens the mystery for me in a way. It's it really is incredible. It really is.
And what is new about this? Because this occurred almost a year ago, December. This coming December will be a year. So really, what is new is the number of witnesses that you guys were able to interview. Correct?
Oh, so on this one, these were the logs that we managed to get copies of by Freedom of Information.
Got it.
What it shows is that the security forces, on a number of occasions, were actually trying to use the drone busters, and the drone busters were having no impact. So they weren't working. So the anti-drone provisions were not working. They couldn't take down these objects. So I mean, this is critical for national security and for the US. And what I was trying to do is I was trying to play devil's advocate, actually, and kind of like looking at this through the lens of national security, looking at the Middle East, because in the Middle East, I think Jeremy Corbell reported on this from a Five Eyes report that was released, that there are so many UAPs in the region, and drones as well, operated by terrorist groups, that it's getting really, really difficult to kind of like know what is what may be truly anomalous, and what may be just like a Hezbollah drone or a Daesh drone. And it's having real consequences in the Middle East for US bases where there are drone attacks and there are personnel being killed. So now you're seeing this occur on US soil with these drones, and for me, like, it's really, really worrying, because that Air Force base is hugely important for the security, especially for Washington, D.C. So if that's kind of like hit or taken out of action by drone strikes, then that is going, that could really have significant security consequences. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy. But as well, I noticed that, again, you can't positively identify them as drones until you capture one or something like that. And this was the same with the West Coast incidents that Jeremy and George reported on, I think from 2019. Actually, when he spoke to some of the witnesses, and one who actually was designated them as UAS, they just told him that, look, we didn't know what they were. I was under pressure to provide a label, and that seemed to represent the best one at the time. So even though the logs, state these things seem to be drones or UAS, it doesn't mean that, because I think the context is really, really important in that these security personnel are pressurized to actually provide a label, and also take into account as well, if you use UAP or something like that, okay, what are the consequences are going to be to actually label them as UAP? I've been working with Robert Hastings lately, and we were reporting on two of the cases in his book. And it just so happened that the US Air Force personnel who did report these as did report like a UFO over the base, there were severe consequences for their careers, and I don't think they were heard from again. So I mean, this has to play part of the equation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the interesting quotes that I found in your article was on, it was from one of these security people, but the quote said, quote, on 11 December 2023, I was posted at Redacted, whatever that location was, and was dispatched approximately 3 times on the flight line, but wasn't able to utilize the drone buster due to not having a visual on the possible UAS. On 15th of December 2023, I was posted at Redacted again, and was dispatched 1 time to conduct an IVA, initial visual assessment, on a possible UAS, but again was unable to get a visual, this time to dense fog. Now, I don't know about you, but I have not heard of any people, amateurs, running a whole fleet of drones in pretty much pretty bad visibility. Have you?
No, and I mean, the number of drones operating, let's say, I mean, that's a lot of coordination to actually pull that off. If it was just like, one person or a couple of people, and also take into account as well that if it was the Chinese or Russians conducting surveillance work, well, they would go into dark mode. They wouldn't have the lights on the UAS as well. So this case is just weird. I'm happy just to throw my hands up and say, look, I really don't have a clue what these things represent. I think the information that came out through the Freedom of Information Act request just deepens the mystery, really, for me. But again, I think it raises huge, vital, fundamental concerns there in terms of base security.
Well, and one of the things that, and we had a witness on, I'm blanking on his name, who witnessed a bunch of this stuff and videotaped it, is the fact that you had a NASA surveillance platform loitering on station above the airbase. And from what I understand, this surveillance platform has an incredibly sophisticated camera system. If these were, in my view, if these were terrestrial drones, let's say from a hobbyist or some foreign actor, I can't see why you would need to stick this, multi-million-dollar, super high-tech, one of its kind surveillance planes from NASA up above the airbase. Like, it just makes no sense. And it also makes no sense that in this entire fleet of drones, that they were not able to knock any of them down with their drone countermeasures. I mean, to me, that is a big red flag.
Yeah, nor did they seem to be able to work out where the origin was. Where were these things taking off from? Where were these things taking off from, and where were they landing? I mean, that's pretty fundamental, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And especially, too, if some of these drone incursions were occurring during heavy fog where an operator wouldn't be able to see where they're going. It just makes no sense. Actually, I meant to put a graphic together, but I went and looked on the Drone Buster website, and these are like handheld devices. They almost look like kind of like a police radar gun to catch speeders, but it's a large handheld device. But the way that this thing works is it jams the GPS, and it jams it, or it does something with the GPS, and then it also jams the radio transmission from the operator. So what it does when it jams the GPS, the drone will go into recovery mode. All of these, this is built into all of these terrestrial hobbyist drones. It'll go into recovery mode. So when it loses the signal from the operator, the drone will automatically go and land where it originally took off. So it'll go back home. So the fact that multiple dozens upon, if not hundreds of these drones were not able to be jammed by our nation's highest tech handheld electronic warfare device, that tells me that these drones, which I don't think that they're drones, are not from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I detailed previously, there are private companies that actually successfully avert drones at Formula One events and other big events. And they don't seem to have a problem at all. It only seems that, the US military, which is the biggest defense spender in the world, seems to have a problem with this.
It's insane. And you also note in the article, too, that local drone clubs, you interviewed some of the folks from there, thought that the official line from the Pentagon that these are drones was absolute baloney.
Absolutely. I mean, they weren't buying the official story. They were quite mystified. Actually, the Formula One reference actually came from one of those guys. And it really didn't make sense because, if it was a hobbyist, they'd get in a lot of trouble for actually flying within one of those restricted areas. And also, the coordination actually needed to do that is very, very sophisticated. So, I mean, yeah, the reaction I was getting when I actually spoke to some of the hobbyists in the Virginia area was of disbelief, really. Like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. I smell bullshit.
Yeah, no, it totally is. I mean, the Pentagon, once again, continues to lie. It's like a compulsion with the Pentagon and the CIA, continuing to lie to the American people and to Congress. And the other thing that one of the folks pointed out in your interview is that any drone operator, amateur drone operator, if you're caught flying a drone over restricted airspace, let alone over an important NORAD, U.S. Northcom airbase, that it's major felony. I mean, it is a major felony. This isn't like some misdemeanor where you check into jail and you check out the following morning. This is a full-blown felony. So to me, that indicates even more that the Pentagon is lying, that these are not hobbyist drones.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a very interesting area because very close by, you've got the shipyards. You've got NASA, you've got their Air Force Base, you've got Eustis as well. You've got CIA facilities, perhaps, I think, in that area too. You've got nuclear power station, you've got an airport. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, there totally is. And there haven't been, the government has not released any photos of these hundreds of drones, correct?
Correct. Yeah, no photos have come out so far.
Yeah. My BS meter is going off. Okay, so let's talk about your latest article, UAP Disclosure: A Paradigm-Changing UFO Transparency Legislation Fails in Congress for Second Consecutive Year, which of course talks about the legislation, and but the other half of it talks about underwater UAP recovery. But before we jump into the underwater UAP recovery stuff, let's talk about the UAP Disclosure Act. So for the folks perhaps watching our show for the first time, what is the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024?
Yeah, so the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024 originated from 2023 and was something that was put out there by the Senate leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Mike Brown, a Republican. And what it is it's a key bit of legislation which would actually provide greater powers and mechanisms for information on UAPs to be publicly available and available to Congress and the President of the United States, mostly through an independent review board of 9 members appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Department of Homeland Security's one of its committees in the Senate. And it would also it would mean that government agencies wouldn't be in a position basically to create excuses of not to provide information to this review board, who would be American citizens, and they would be cleared to receive the information. And they would brief the President of the United States before deciding whether to classify information, but also would allow materials to be made available as well to the review board, non-human materials and materials of unknown origin. And that could mean information from outside government, let's say. It could also mean defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, BAE Systems, providing materials. And it could have meant that the government could exercise eminent domain to take custody of those materials as well. So, I mean, this could have really opened things up and provided teeth to the elected part of government to provide transparency to the American people. But unfortunately, it seems to have been thwarted in the most part yet again, following last year when it was gutted.
And this failed, as we mentioned, failed to get into the manager's package. So how did that go down? I know initially we thought it was perhaps Rand Paul, but what have you heard?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've just released a new article basically saying that this is something that's shrouded in mystery, confusion, and allegations. I was hearing during the summer, I'm not sure about you, but what I was hearing was that Senator Rand Paul was resistant to the legislation. That one of my sources spoke to Senator Chris Coons' office and one of his staffers who'd confirmed that to my source. And I'd heard from someone else that Senator Rand Paul was just he just wanted to resist anything that was supported by Chuck Schumer, not just the UAPDA but other amendments as well. So I mean, this kind of allegation about Rand Paul didn't just come from nowhere,
right.
Let's say. Look, it seems, you've mentioned and, you've told me that you've got sources. I know, you've provided me good information on that, and I've included that in the latest article as well. And it seems to me that Mitch McConnell may now look like the likely suspect. I mean, it had been alleged that Mitch McConnell had been drafted in by Mike Turner and Mike Rogers last year to oppose the UAPDA and get it gutted. From what I had heard, I think there was a staffer within McConnell's office who had actually kind of like led a lot of this resistance. So it wasn't actually coming from McConnell personally himself. But look, again, as I've noted in the article, I don't think anyone's going to go on record and basically say, look, I'm responsible for this. You would note even last year, even though it was widely believed that Representative Turner was like the most guilty party in its gutting, even he, when he spoke to News Nation, was like, look, I'm not holding up this legislation. And when I asked his office, they reverted back to that line. And publicly they've kind of like refused to take the blame. He'll go so far as like saying it's badly drafted language, but he won't admit to being the force that led to it being gutted. And I think, again, you're going to find the same scenario this time around. No one's going to go public and say, oh, I'm the senator that, led to its exclusion from the manager's pack, unfortunately. Well, that's my current interpretation. So, as we may have our suspicions and have good information in terms of that proof positive 100% and confirmation, that we're going to get it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really a shame. And what I understand from Matt Laszlo, another great journalist like yourself that is doing good work on this topic, he got basically a quick short interview or soundbite from Senator Mike Rounds, who is one of the sponsors of this thing, who essentially said this thing is not dead. Are you hearing anything about how he is going to try and revive it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dynamics at play. So we know that there's going to be hearings potentially in November. So one hearing will be in the Senate, led by Kirsten Gillibrand. And that is likely to just be an update from the Arrow's director, although I've not had that confirmed yet that she is looking for an update. That could be significant if Dr. John Kozlowski takes another stance on the UAP topic compared to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. So that could be ammunition, let's say, for senators to provide urgency to actually get some elements, at least within the UAPDA, airdropped within negotiations with the House. And then we've got the other hearing as well from Representative Nancy Mace. And I think that might be the more explosive of the hearings. And let's say that a lot of good people, including Jeremy Corbell, have been in Washington, D.C. in the last few weeks, making introductions to Nancy Mace and other representatives within the House. And I think that if all goes to plan, we could have some really, really explosive testimony that could potentially force the hand of the Senate and the House to kind of like airdrop the UAPDA back in to play with negotiations. Obviously, that's the best case scenario. I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Right.
The likelihood seems quite low. Danny Sheehan has explained to me that they'd be looking to that when you're talking about airdrop, you're not talking about airdropping the whole of the act within negotiations. You're talking about airdropping certain elements. And Danny Sheehan, I believe, would be looking for heads of government agencies to be providing NARA or the archivist of the United States information immediately on UAPs, as opposed to its current language, which is kind of like as soon as practically possible. So that's what he'll be looking to do. But look, it's not a given. There's dynamics at play, and let's see what happens. But I'm hopeful that we could perhaps get something dropped in. That'd be great. But it's also worth taking into account that there's no indication that resistance from the House of Representatives and the likes of Mike Turner has actually dropped, which would make it feasible to kind of like pass anything within those negotiations.
We know from the legislation which is essentially identical to the one this year, that the legislation from last year did not pass. And one of the things that we heard through the grapevine was that it was the eminent domain clause that is what killed it. Do you think that is going to be the case this time, or moreover, do you think the eminent domain thing is still an issue? I know Travis Taylor went and messaged against the legislation, I'm guessing on the eminent domain language that's in the bill.
Yeah, and it was also the review boards as well. I think it was Sean Kirkpatrick was basically complaining about that it would be doubling up on what the Arrow was doing. But look, I was told last year that that Travis Taylor had nothing to do with kind of like lobbying against the UAP Disclosure Act. I was told that. I mean, in the article, I didn't even mention Radiance Technology. No, I didn't even mention the names of Travis Taylor and Jay Stratton, like Danny Sheehan did. I made a point of excluding those names because I didn't want to pass the blame onto anyone individually.
Sure.
Although I did mention Radiance Technology. But yeah, I kind of like did put that into the article because Jay and someone else was basically saying that we had nothing to do with this. And then a few weeks later, it comes out that, Travis is bragging about opposing the UAPDA and the eminent domain clause within it. And that just really upset me. Not the fact that he was opposing it. Look, there are plenty of people, who seem to have very, very good arguments about not including eminent domain. And I'm not against that. That's fine.
Right.
It's just kind of like, let's be transparent here.
Yeah.
Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. That's the main thing that I didn't like about it. But look, eminent domain, it's certainly could pose a problem, especially for look. As you know, the game has been for a long time that the CIA and perhaps the Office of Naval Research facilitates material transfers to a preferred list of contractors. And there are a bunch of new contractors now, defense contractors in the game, who want a part of this. They want the goodies as well. And let's say that you were going to transfer a craft from Lockheed to like another company that didn't previously have access. Eminent domain could potentially pose a risk for them. It could mean the deal's not going to occur anymore, and that's certainly a risk. That's obviously just a scenario I've got in my head. I don't have any evidence there was any agreement of a transfer or something like that. But I mean, that's just a potential thought experiment to explain why someone might be against eminent domain, as opposed to some of the arguments that are being made public about Skinwalker Ranch and whatnot.
Yeah, one of the things I was told was during that legislation when it failed was that the whole eminent domain thing was actually a red herring. That wasn't the real reason they opposed it. The real reason they opposed it was money and power, essentially. So, but I want to rewind a bit because I'm really, really interested in. So, as I mentioned in the second part of the article, you talk about this joint effort between the CIA and the Navy to recover UAP that have been crashed in the ocean, or that have crashed in the ocean, or were baited into an area and then crashed. So how is this essentially structured the same way as how the CIA Directorate of Science and Technology and the Office of Global Access does it? Give us some more insight into how this naval recovery operation works.
So, as you know, Matt, I've been sitting on this information for quite a while now, and I felt quite nervous about it because the retrieval program undertaken by the CIA and elements of the US Navy is probably one of the most tightly guarded secrets in the US government, and those protecting it can be quite nasty. And I was warned about that. But I felt the need to get the information out because it seemed that Congress has failed again. So it's up to journalists to actually put their necks on the line if members of Congress don't have the courage to do that. And I was confident of the story because its origination is very, very similar to where I got the information from the Office of Global Access from. So I felt confident in kind of like putting it out there, and I did get corroboration from one other source. But otherwise, in terms of talking to sources, it was kind of like no comment. So no, I'm not there.
So you really struck a nerve, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, a lot of people that I spoke to when I was researching the story just didn't want to go there. They didn't want to put they didn't want to put a target on themselves by speaking to me. But no one was denying the information, importantly, or no one was calling BS on it. And I understand since the story has come out, those who I respect their opinion, let's say, and their insight and knowledge, none of them have called BS on this.
Wow.
So yeah, I think it's interesting. Look, as a journalist, you've got to make a call. Do I put this information out there or not? You know, I felt more confident with the Office of Global Access story because we had multiple accounts, more corroboration, officially and unofficially. But for this information, that I made the call, and I felt relatively confident to get it out there. But yeah, and I mean, it all kind of like makes sense, because again, like the Office of Global Access, this isn't just dedicated to UAP or stuff of unknown origin. It's dedicated to kind of like stuff that's Russian, Chinese, and from some other nation. And that's probably what they do most of their work on. But like the Office of Global Access, they do also come across operations where they're dealing with stuff of unknown and potential non-human origin as well. So the way it works is that you've got something called the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, which is an office run jointly by the CIA and the US Navy. I mean, I'm hearing talk on that at the moment that it's kind of like a wrestling match going on for control of that. CIA want more control, but the US Navy may have taken more control over that. But that's kind of its origin, birth from the CIA and the US Navy. So basically that does undersea tracking and detection. So in terms of such a mission, they would basically be responsible for detecting and tracking the underwater craft using their very, very classified sensors underwater, which is like the most highly guarded secret, most likely in the US government. And then what happens is that a mission gets put together, coordinated by United States Special Operations Command. And I mean, if you look on their website, for instance, you can see that they're working with Lockheed Martin submersibles at the moment.
Big surprise there.
Yeah. So what I've been told is that they work jointly with the CIA's Directorate of Operations. And within the CIA's Directorate of Operations, there is actually a Maritime Branch. And I mean, if you look online, there are some stories that you can hear about some of the missions conducted by the Maritime Branch of the CIA and some really, really kind of dangerous missions that operatives undertake clandestinely. Just that they'll be using vessels, for example, that are civilian, and so they'll do everything undercover, and it's they're the experts at doing stuff and not drawing attention to themselves. And then, from my understanding, they have historically used submersibles from Woods Hole Institutes.
From who again?
Then Woods Hole. I think it's the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute.
Woods Hole, okay. Uh-huh.
So they provide submersibles and other undersea crafts that can be used for finding these crafts that are underwater. The one element I wasn't able to kind of get more information about is in terms of how do you get the salvage ships in position to undertake the missions. I did see that I think it was an F-35 that went down in the South China Sea or something last year. I might be wrong, but I do believe to salvage that they used a Chinese-made vessel from Singapore. So perhaps when it comes to this, you just have to leverage whatever assets are in the area. I don't know. It could be like that, like we learned with the Office of Global Access. It's very, very dependent on where these things land or crash, and making the most out of assets that are in the area, because time is of the essence to do this. So that's something I'm interested in exploring more, potentially, if I do choose to go further on this storage, which I might not. And then from my understanding, it's the Office of Naval Research, which then does the transfer of the crafts or materials to defense contractors. And if you look at the offices of the Office of Naval Research, I mean, they've got offices all around the world. So yeah, I bet they've got many more as well, potentially, that are kind of unofficial, let's say. But it's got a good footprint to undertake that kind of mission in terms of transferring the goods over to defense contractors. And then from my understanding, the defense contractors are the ones who do the analysis in gathering where these things are from. And that could potentially provide plausible deniability when you ask the US Navy and CIA in terms of whether they've discovered something of non-human origin. Well, if the defense contractor's done that work in discovering the origin, you kind of have plausible deniability to say that you haven't discovered anything of non-human origin, potentially. So, yeah. And then from my understanding as well, I think the nuclear materials get transferred to the national labs.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. These guys are up to so much sneaky stuff that they hide from Congress. It's not funny. But actually, what is not funny is what you said earlier about that you had to really kind of worry for your personal safety. I think you had said something like it was someone or some of your sources had told you that some of these folks or organizations can be a bit nasty. Is that something you can elaborate on?
Look, Matt, we know that there are public figures in the UAP topic who've worked in government. Gosh, sorry, you might be able to hear my daughter cry in the background. Sorry. Just learning to walk at the moment. But look, there are people with knowledge about this in the public, and they won't speak about this. They certainly have knowledge, I bet, most likely, on these retrieval programs, on these reverse engineering programs, but they're not speaking out about it. Why are they not speaking out about it? Because there is a real risk. There is a real danger. They do not want a target on them. So, it falls to journalists to kind of like put themselves at risk instead. I don't have anyone watching my back, certainly in the UK. So, and it's like when I first released that story, we're having a conversation. I was telling you how worried I was about releasing that information. I mean, at first I kept it more kind of ambiguous, not directly alluding, I don't think, to that program and how it works. But I eventually removed that reference because I didn't want a target on my head. And I then slept soundly, just thinking, okay, I've not made this public. I've not made this big deal. But then, just someone went back onto Wayback Machine. I don't know why they're on Wayback Machine looking at one of my articles. And it just shows as well that there are people looking with a very, very, they're looking very, very closely at my articles and my work with a fine comb. And I discovered that, and they were trying to basically say that it was some kind of mistake and I deleted it because of that, or because I don't know, just making up reasons and then saying I was making stealth edits. What do you expect me to do? Put a note on the article that I put some, potentially dangerous information up that I didn't want out there in public and have made an edit. No, I don't want that. I'm not stupid. Putting that information, making that information public again and taking the screenshots, that kind of like upset me quite a bit. And I was forced to make a choice. I was forced, okay, this person's obviously trying to catch and kill the information to make it look really implausible, or that I made a mistake. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go all out and provide the information I have in terms of how this works. So that's what I decided to do in the end. But there's always a balance. There's always a dance of how much information you put out, how over the line that you go without putting yourself at risk.
Yeah, no, for sure. Sorry, you said something?
With this, I don't know. I have a family. I've got an 8-year-old. My daughter's 15 months old. I look after them a lot of the time, and they're my life. So this is my life we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Not something to take lightly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And oh, by the way, I've been meaning to say this for quite some time, but it looks like the Office of Global Access was renamed.
I've heard the same, yes.
Yeah, so
I've heard the same.
So apparently the Office of Global Access, the super secret CIA Office of Global Access that nobody wants to talk about. It was funny. I had the same thing with some of my regular sources that have always been very, very helpful. As soon as I mention CIA Office of Global Access, their lips zipped shut like right away. I mean, it was clear these people would not comment about the CIA Office of Global Access, which the CIA Office of Global Access is basically, as we explained, the organization within the CIA that tasks UAP recoveries. And also the CIA Office of Global Access, this is the organization that specializes in operating in denied territory. So if you need to send a small group into Russia to pick up some goodies from our neighbors not from here, the CIA Office of Global Access, they are the ones that generate that mission. They have these agreements with allies, and then they are able to go and operate in these denied territories. But anyway, it's apparently now called the Transnational Technology Mission Center, or TTMC. I've also seen it in what we have been able to gather from sources that it is also referred to as TMC. And this was essentially a renaming in around 2021 when the CIA decided to rename the Office of Global Access to the Transnational Technology Mission Center. So, but I also understand that a lot of people still refer to it as the Office of Global Access. So, yeah, what are you going to do? But you talk about like the harassment, and I know you're talking about Dean Johnson, Dean Johnson, who does really amazing work at really kind of unpacking this legislation. He's worked on Capitol Hill for quite some time, and I know that there was skepticism on his part. I'm putting that nicely, skepticism on his part that there would be like retaliation and things like that. But I can tell you firsthand that I encountered this when we put out when you and I and Josh Boswell, when we put out the Office of Global Access article in the Daily Mail, which we essentially outed the CIA Office of Global Access. That was a really, really big deal. And we, of course, outed the fact that the CIA Office of Global Access has been recovering crashed UAPs for quite some time. And I know the morning that article came out, we were warned to be very careful that we would likely be approached by either someone from FBI, AFOSI, CIA to try and essentially honeypot us. So we were warned that this information was so maybe damaging to the CIA Office of Global Access that they would want to know how we found out what we found out, what our sources were. And of course, we had sworn as journalists that we would not reveal those sources. So that morning I had to go, and I know you know this story, but some of the people on the show or that watch the show may not be aware of this. So that morning that our article went live in the Daily Mail, I had to fly to Las Vegas to work on a project. the show goes live, and I'm staying at the Waldorf Astoria on the Strip, and there's no casino there. It's super, super quiet. Anyway, I go upstairs to the bar to start working on YouTube comments and whatnot. And I don't drink, so I'm just sitting there drinking a soda water. And this guy sits across from me, this older gentleman at the bar, and there are like 8 or 9 people at the bar, and I hear him talking to the person right next to him about UFOs, and immediately my hackles went up. And again, this is the afternoon that our Daily Mail article goes live, anyway, I hear this guy talk about the UFOs, and so I decide that I'm just going to engage him, and I say, hey, did you read that Daily Mail article about the CIA Office of Global Access? And without missing a beat, this guy says, no, but I read an article about 2 weeks ago that said Lou Elizondo is a liar. So here I am in this bar of this 5-star hotel. There's no casino. There are 8 or 9 people in this bar, and somebody happens to walk up and start talking to me, when I ask him about Lou Elizondo, who hadn't been in the news. This was November of last year. Hadn't been in the news. If you don't track this topic, you probably don't know who Lou Elizondo is. But I took that as this was clearly someone from FBI, AFOSI, or CIA that somehow found out I was staying at this hotel and said this crazy thing. And this guy actually said it twice, because I kind of said it. I was so taken aback by it. I ignored it and said, well, you should look up at the article, or look for the article. I wait about 10 minutes and I decide to re-engage him, and I say, hey, did you go and find that article in the Daily Mail about the CIA Office of Global Access? And he looks at me again, he stands up, he has his cell phone, and he says, no, but that article about Lou Elizondo being a liar sure stuck out in my head. And he gets up and he leaves the bar. So if that isn't journalistic intimidation, I don't know what is. So when Dean Johnson says, oh, this is a bunch of baloney, well, Dean, respectfully, and I definitely should not have kind of lashed out at Dean the way that I did, because I was so upset about it. But yeah, this kind of stuff does happen, and people like us do have to worry about being harassed. It's not something without serious concern. Sorry, go ahead.
Actually, no, it's fine. I think, what Dean said, it's actually quite nice to think of, maybe I am just laughing. It makes me feel better, believe it or not, because, but look, I think the main thing is that the people that we speak to, they are being targeted. They are whistleblowers, they are witnesses. And, because I'm a journalist, and you're working on the Office of Global Access story, and unfortunately, because we have that information, we come under that same umbrella and that same threat as they do. So calling into question whether this is real and downplaying it and calling it LARPing, while by doing that you're also kind of asserting that the whistleblowers and those who talk to us and they warn us about such threats, that they're also laughing, but it's maybe all in their head. So yeah. I just want to put that out there as well. But look, I would love to believe that. That would make my day. If I could be convinced that this wasn't real, it really would make me feel a lot better, because, I do this under the understanding that there would be, some threat to me, and that's been made clear to me that, I am potentially under threat. So
yeah.
That's the reality that I have to contest with. I could just go away. I don't get paid millions to do liberation times. I could just go away, and just live with my family happily, and, that'd be it. I don't have to do this. But
yeah,
has to.
But we were told that our show, that the NSA, the National Security Agency, is monitoring this show. We were told that they're monitoring this show, and we were told that they monitor the YouTube comments. I'm guessing they are probably monitoring my Twitter account. That I don't know. This was a very specific bit of information from within an ally in the intelligence community that the NSA is paying attention to what we're doing. Now, to what extent, I don't know. For instance, I have no idea if I'm being surveilled. If that is occurring, that has to happen under a FISA warrant. And we'll just say some legal things are going to happen to determine that. But, but I've always kind of figured, because I'm so outspoken, that my stuff is being monitored, and always kind of assumed that. But when someone tells you within that world in DC that you are actually being monitored by the NSA. And as I understand it, the NSA and the CIA are actually the two main stakeholders of the UAP issue. It makes you nervous. It truly does. Anyway, I've ranted long enough about that. Let's move on to some audience questions if you have some time.
Sure, let's go for it.
Cool. Okay. Dueling Groks, Matt and Christopher, how far, and I'm just going to put this question to you, how far are we along in the disclosure timeline in your eyes? I'm referring to Carl Nell timeline from the Seoul conference.
Yeah, very, very good question. I go back to Lou's book, Imminent. Some of the talk that I do here is that something may be coming, that, it's better to have this conversation before it's too late. I don't know what that is. As I said, I don't know if it's a threat. I don't know if it's good or bad, but we've also got the Chinese and we've got the Russians reverse engineering this as well to, basically dictatorships and security states that could potentially have an edge on reverse engineering as compared to the USA, because they could dedicate more people to this and keep security very, very tight. If they kind of get to that point before the US does and reverse some key technology, then the geopolitical situation will change drastically. So there's also the argument that you've got to get this information out and make it kind of public that Lockheed and other defense contractors are working on this, so that you could attract more resources and the best engineers in the world to actually work on this, to give the US some more edge. As it's been said to me, the potential transfer between Lockheed Martin and OSAP, which was actually stopped by the CIA, that was done because Lockheed had kind of done all it could to kind of reverse engineer what they could and understand the materials all they could. So they wanted some outside thinking, and that's what that deal was about, basically getting it into that facility that Bigelow had, and getting some other minds to kind of look at these materials and see if they can come up with any other theories and concepts and other uses. And so it's important. So I don't know. I talk to people. The people I do talk to basically say, look, the toothpaste is out of the tube now. There's no stopping this process. But in terms of timeline, it's very, very difficult. There's so many things that we don't know. I think a lot of people in mid-2023 would have been saying, well, it's unstoppable now. The UAPDA is going to be passed, and once that's out and once that's got passed, it's going to be a roller coaster, and we're going to get this through, and we're going to have transparency. Well, look, that didn't work out in the end, and there are always complex situations that could play out either way. So it's very, very difficult to make predictions. But from what I do know, it seems to me that this is irreversible now.
Yeah. I completely agree. Science Bob, huge fan of Science Bob McGuire. Thank you for the super chat. And he says, thank you for all the work that you guys do. So thank you for the kind words. Evan Millar says, stay safe, Christopher. No questions. Just thank you immensely for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And there are so many people, you have the people, the kind of usual suspects, and, one we spoke about earlier that are critical of your work, but I would say they represent way less than 5% of the total people that watch your work. Everybody really appreciates the work that you do, your honesty in reporting, the fact that you're not making $1 million. You're doing this because you believe in it. It's not like a money-driven thing. You want to get to the truth, whatever it may be. And I know that I've always held you in such high regard for your integrity. And I know everyone else that watches does as well. Anyway, Evan, thank you for that comment. Dueling Groks. Any tips for others who wish to do their own investigation in this field? Good question.
Yeah, absolutely. My advice would be to do the Freedom of Information Act requests, start asking questions of government offices, and also I think it's really, really useful as well. I mean, I used to do this more than I do now, but trawl through Twitter. Sometimes you could get some really, really good information from there. Sometimes someone might make a comment on there saying, "Oh, I saw a UFO when I was working in the US Air Force." And it could be ignored, but all it takes is for you to notice that and start up a conversation with that person who posted it. That certainly happened to me before. There was the gentleman that I reported on who worked at, I think it was Whiteman Air Force Base, that said that, he encountered UFOs on, I think it was 2 occasions. And I'd only come across him because I saw that he commented on UFOs, and he just mentioned that and no one else picked up on it. So yeah, you can always find some real gems on Twitter as well.
Yeah, indeed. Let's see, Vidbusters here. This person says the best total list of UAP documents exists in the National Archives, the Internet Archives, and specific presidential libraries. And are there any other sources that you think are good sources for information other than those listed? And thank you for the super chat donation.
No, I would like to touch upon the National Archives, though. So, I did come across something the other day about the OSS, which was the organization that came before the CIA in the Second World War. And there was some information about a mission to expedite, speed up the surrender of Italy. And they were capturing scientists, they were capturing admirals, and doing raids and stuff in Italy. And what happened was that one of the lead guys, I'm really not very good with names at the moment, but one of the lead guys who had actually kept a record of what he was doing in Italy made sure that when the USS was getting wrapped up by Truman, that he had kept copies. He was taking microfilm copies of the notes he was taking when he was undertaking these missions. And one of them, in terms of when they got to northern Italy, I believe what happened was that it was stated that the mission to expedite the surrender of Italy was moved into, I believe it was US Army R&D. So why would a mission to expedite the surrender of Italy get moved to an R&D division, let's say? If it's the division, which I think it might be, I haven't confirmed yet, but that might be the same R&D division that the Manhattan Project came under as well. So, you do think, did they come across the Magenta craft in northern Italy, and then did they decide to move that kind of that mission to expedite the surrender of Italy? They moved that to R&D because it became something totally different, because they had to retrieve it and get it to US soil perhaps, and then reverse engineer it. So, I mean, from my understanding, some missing parts of those documents are kept within NARA. Although I believe the documents have actually been looked at by the CIA as well. So I think some elements of those might be missing or redacted because of the CIA, who actually went through them in the 1980s. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'll try to find the link. Apologies, I might have messed up some bits of information, but it actually originated from a post on Reddit, which was really, really good. I'll make sure that I get it posted up on X or something so that everyone else can have a look. But I think that's a really good potential lead, especially if we're talking about retrievals and reverse engineering from, World War II with that Italian craft.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned that. Another question from Sylvia Gauthier. In your opinion, does the USA have an agreement with other countries for the recovery of crashed UAPs?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yes. I think I think it works. I think there are very, very different setups to these retrievals of unknown craft. So obviously we've got the information that I provided on how you would allegedly go about retrieving objects from under the seas. So you'd have Directorate of Operations, Maritime Branch, and you would have USOCOM, Office of Naval Research, and whatnot. And then you'd have contested territory, which would be Office of Global Access. And then would you not, if it was a Five Eyes scenario where you were actually operating within a joint theatre, it could be Five Eyes foreign materials program, perhaps. So there are different setups to doing this, and I believe that I think there is some coordination between the US and its allies in regards to doing that. I'd also point out as well that there's possible retrievals of objects in space. So it is my belief that the US and other nations to possess the technology to deorbit objects back into the atmosphere of Earth. I believe that exists. I mean, if you look up on Google at the moment, that's kind of an emergent technology. And I believe as well there's a contract that SpaceX has won to use, I think it's a space tug that they're going to develop to deorbit the ISS. But I believe that those kinds of capabilities are already possessed by the United States military. And it could be part of, the war that's in space at the moment. So you could be talking about nets, you could be talking about space arms, or just kind of using thrusters just to kind of bounce an object out of orbit or something like that, whether it be a Russian satellite or something like that. So I think that, I do believe that might be going on as well, and that they do already have that ability. But I think as well there may be an element of this where the US may be working with countries that it's not supposed to be working with.
Wow.
That might also be a scenario that, I don't have any firm information on that, unfortunately, that I report and be very, very confident on, but that's something that I've always entertained as a possibility, especially if you do perceive, these things as a possible threat to Earth. You would have to coordinate with countries that you don't even get along with under that circumstance, especially when it potentially comes to retrieval operations and kinetic action, perhaps as well. Although reverse engineering would be something that is definitely off bounds to the Chinese or Russians, they would all be competing in that aspect. But perhaps there is some cooperation when it comes to retrievals and any kinetic action that does occur as well, perhaps. I mean, that's obviously something I'm entertaining. This is how I come up with a lot of these stories. I entertain a lot of these things. I ask the questions. If I get good leads, I'll keep going. But if it's spelt to me that this is BS, then I won't go there. So that's just a thought. Sorry, I digress.
No, it's I totally understand. But essentially what you're hearing is that we have the technology to deorbit things possibly of non-human origin and basically take them out of near Earth orbit and then pick them up.
That's something which I think is a possibility. Yes.
Got it.
Word it that way.
Okay. Well, that's nothing would surprise me. Let's see. Paul Rudman, has Chris heard anything about the telescope thing, JWST discovery? This thing about 2027.
Very, very good question, and I will break something to you on here. Just give me a moment. I got an email from someone because I had heard about this, and I did decide to chase up. So I spoke to the guy from Cambridge University, Niku. Oh, sorry, my son's just entered. Lincoln.
Hi, Lincoln.
Okay, no, it's fun. So I spoke to Niku Madhu Sudan, the guy who had he's asking for the controller. Sorry. So I'd spoken to Professor Madhu Sudan, if I pronounced that correctly. Apologies. But he's the one who came out there saying that he thought he'd found signs of life on K218b. So I did email him, and yeah, he came back to me basically saying there's no updates at the moment. We're working on some new observations, and it will be a few months before we can have an update on that front. There is also some theoretical work happening in parallel. So yeah, I thought I'd provide that as an exclusive to you guys. So
love it.
I provide some insight.
I love it. Absolutely. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. We know we only had you for an hour and a half, but really appreciate the generosity of your time and making some time to get away from family for a bit. And we know that's always tough, and that you're juggling a lot of normal life things in addition to doing this.
Absolutely, absolutely. I do this from my son's bedroom. Look, there he is right now, Lincoln. But look, that is my life before everything else. You know, Lincoln, Lily, and my wife. You know, they're my life. So they come first.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, thank you very much for joining us. And finally, how can folks find your work?
They can find me on www.liberationtimes.com. And my Twitter is Chris UK Sharp, and yeah, they can find me on those mainly, and they can find me with Lincoln on the school run as well.
Awesome. Hi, Lincoln.
Hi. He's just living his best life here, just his normal existence, you know.
I love
asking for the controller.
You're a good man, and you're a good father, Chris Sharp.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you so much to your audience as well, and all those that have supported me. It really does mean the world to me, so thank you.
No, thank you. All right, Chris Sharp, ladies and gentlemen. All right, well, that was just fantastic. I love Chris Sharp, family man. He is so dedicated to this topic. And yeah, it's something else. Let me see if I can go through some of the questions that we weren't able to answer with Chris, and I'll see if I can go through some of them. Here we go. Let's see. From Luis Astero, how do Chris and Matt avoid being the victims of psychological splitting by debunkers and fake true believers? I mean, really, I don't pay attention to anything that the debunkers have to say. They don't matter in the sense of I'm not going to convince them otherwise, you know, that these things are real or anything. And frankly, I don't really care whether they believe it or not. The reason that I speak up or stand up to the debunkers is these guys have a voice, you know. So this fraud squad, you have Mick West, you have Stephen Greenstreet. To a lesser extent, you've got Jason Colavito, this Luis guy that teaches somewhere at a university here in California. Some of them I do believe are paid to do this, not everyone, but I think the thing that's really clear with these folks is that they're not just debunking cases. That's one thing. You could make a fair argument. It's like, hey, if you want to argue with Mark von Rendenkampf about whether the Go Fast video is real, fine. But the fact that Mick West, Jason Colavito, Stephen Greenstreet, this Luis guy, they are so hyper-focused on attacking the integrity of whistleblowers, in particular men and women who have served this country, American veterans. When Mick West, Jason Colavito, Stephen Greenstreet, and others, when they go after Lou Elizondo, when they go after Sarah Gam, a former NGA analyst, when they go after whistleblower David Grush, it not only is a reflection on their character, who they are as human beings, but it gives you a window into their motivations. again, if it's like, hey, if you want to debunk some video all day, and I'm not smart enough to be able to analyze this stuff, so I don't even try. Knock yourself out if you want to argue with Mark about video analysis of IR flare and all that kind of stuff. But the fact that these guys are so hyper-focused and they spend so much time. I mean, I see the amount of time that people like Colavito, McWest, this Luis guy, Stephen Greenstreet, the amount of incredible time they spend on this. I mean, incredible. It really makes you wonder why they're doing it. It's like people have hobbies, and I don't know about you, but I can't afford to spend 100% or we'll say 75% of my time during the day, on a hobby. And you hear McWest say, "Oh, I'm doing this for fun." I mean, come on, man. I mean, do you really think we are that stupid? Mick West, he is not a dumb guy. He knows exactly what he is doing. When he claims that, oh, I'm just doing this for fun. I mean, come on, man. We are not that stupid. So anyway, yeah. So in essence, I don't listen to them because what they have to say doesn't matter. The issue is when you have people like Mick West or Stephen Greenstreet, who, Greenstreet posts all of this garbage on the New York Post YouTube site that gets 100,000 views, or you have Mick West appearing on news outlets spouting his baloney, his just absolute garbage, or this Luis guy who's somehow, I have no idea how or why Scientific American hired this guy to write a poorly written opinion piece. This guy is probably more qualified. He's probably not even qualified to wash my car, let alone write something for Scientific American. So these folks, regardless of what I'm going to do here, whether I choose to engage them or not, they're going to do it. I get this feedback, and I suspect some of this feedback are from people that are kind of double agents in a way. In other words, they try to act like they're UAP advocates, but they're sent to kind of disrupt efforts and maybe in this sense discourage me from continuing to engage these professional debunkers. But whether I message on this or not, they're going to keep doing it, and they're going to continue to have an audience. Greenstreet is going to continue to do his videos for New York Post, regardless of what I do. Mick West is going to continue to do whatever he's doing, whether he's Lucky Louie on Wikipedia or whatever, or appearing possibly appearing on a debunking UFO television show that's going to appear in January with Mick. I'm sorry, not Mick West, with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the former director of Arrow. These guys are going to continue to do this. So the question always is, do you sit back and ignore them and let them just run their mouths and actually have an effect on what people think about this topic? Or do you stand up for them? Do you stand up to the bully and say, you know what? I'm not going to let you spout your BS and not call you out on it. So that's the reason that I do that, and we'll continue to call them out. Let's see. So we talked about that. I do believe, Sylvie, that there is an agreement with other countries for crashed UAPs. That was a bit of information we also came across when we wrote the article about the CIA Office of Global Access. David Brown, again, thank you for the super chat. Pat Grant, we asked about the 2027 thing. Paul Ridman, Paul Ridman said, why can this legislation not be introduced as a standalone bill? If nothing else, people will have to go on the record opposing it. I do not know the answer to that, but I think that is a valid way to do this. That I don't have a good answer for, but that is an excellent question. Johannes Fault, Matt, can you please spill the beans about the alleged JWST issue? I'm not going to comment about that at all. let's see, question, how can we protect journalists doing great work who will be the upcoming hearings? Thanks, Matt and Chris. That's from Terrence. That's a good question. Because we're journalists, we are afforded certain protections, but you still have to be careful. That's all there is to it. Nielsen, I had a question for Chris. Did you interview Gary McKinnon? I don't know who that is. Sorry. So I want to talk about a few things here. Firstly, this legislation. We have been advocating for the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024 for quite a few months now. And the fact that it did not make it into the manager's package, despite all of the efforts that all of us have made, to get this thing across the finish line, it really calls into question. And I encourage all of you to contact your lawmakers and ask them flat out, did they oppose this legislation? Yes or no? We want an answer on record. I want an answer from the office of Mitch McConnell, whether he really did oppose it or not. And if not, why? I suspect that the people that did oppose it, hopefully it was just McConnell and no one else, but I would not be surprised if the Pentagon leaned on him and said, hey guys, you got to kill this bill, this legislation. So that doesn't surprise me in a way. Now, I'm hopeful that Senator Mike Rounds will find another way to get this in the Senate version of the NDAA and the IAA, so that when it does go to the House for reconciliation at the end of the year, we can have a true debate about it. I'm also of the opinion, too, that if this eminent domain language is the sticking point, that should be negotiated away, and let's just not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's get the legislation enacted, and then we can, through additional legislation, address some of the holes that may be left by the exclusion of the eminent domain language. But folks, we got to get this stuff through. One of the main reasons, and I've spoken about this many times, the UAP issue is classified into two buckets. It's classified, it's all classified under the executive level. But you've got one element of the UAP issue that is classified under Presidential Emergency Action Directive. So those are the same things as continuity of government operations. Those are same thing in the same bucket as government operations, post a significant event, say nuclear exchange. That is in the same bucket as the U.S. nuclear war plan, which is called the OP plan, operational plan. I think it's OP plan 8088. That's in that same bucket. So PEDS, Presidential Emergency Action Directives, Congress has no legal authority to view those classified products. Absolutely none. Now, PEDS, as I understand it, the president, some of those can be declassified by the president. So how I understand it, under executive order, the president can, on his own, he or she, they can, on their own, decide to declassify the UAP topic, even though it's under a Presidential Emergency Action Directive. They have the ability to do that. What they do not have the ability to do, and case in point, so we know for a fact part of the document trove that President Trump was illegally holding on to, part of what President Trump's legal team is arguing is that all of those documents he was able to declassify on his own, and full stop, right? Well, one of the things that he actually had in his document trove dealt with U.S. nuclear information. And this is where the difference is. So there's something, I mentioned just a second ago that the UAP issue is classified into two buckets. One bucket is under a PED, Presidential Emergency Action Directive. The other bucket is classified under the Atomic Energy Act of 1954 under what is called transclassified nuclear information. So the transclassified product, a security designation, and it falls under what's called restricted data and previously restricted data. Anything that falls under transclassified nuclear information, those are things like nuclear weapons designs. Those are things like nuclear weapons research. The Havana Syndrome, members of Congress that are watching this, members of Congress and staffers that are watching this show, the Havana Syndrome thing, the way the CIA has hidden it from you is they stuffed it into the Department of Energy, and it sits under transclassified nuclear information. So that is how they have hidden it from you. So what is the difference between a PED and what is the difference between things classified under the 1954 Atomic Energy Act under transclassified nuclear information? Transclassified nuclear information cannot be unilaterally declassified by the president. Let me say that again. Items that fall under the Department of Energy 1954 Atomic Energy Act, that is transclassified nuclear information, cannot be declassified by the president alone. So in order to declassify that, and in particular, what we're talking about are crashed vehicles. So CIA Office of Global Access, or their new name, TMC, not TMZ, 3 Mile Zone with the celebrity stuff, but TMC, the Office of Global Access, when they pick up these vehicles of non-human origin and it gets sent to either defense contractors or to the national labs, it falls under the Atomic Energy Act 1954 under transclassified nuclear information. Those material holdings cannot be unilaterally declassified by the president. It has to be done by a vote. It's the President of the United States. It's the Secretary of Energy. There's a deputy level person, I believe, in the Department of Defense. And I believe there's a deputy level person in the CIA. They all have to vote to declassify that stuff that falls under the transclassified nuclear information. The president is the tie-breaking vote in that. But really what it does is it prevents an American president from deciding on their own, oh, I'm going to sell a nuclear weapons design to Vladimir Putin, or deciding on their own, I'm going to go and tell the world about this huge stash of crashed UAPs that we got sitting in the garage. That president would be under severe legal jeopardy. Now, I would also tell you that if you leak transclassified nuclear information that is under the Atomic Energy Act, the punishment for that falls under the Espionage Act. I think it's Espionage Act of 1910. The penalty for leaking that information is capital punishment. It is what happened to the Rosenbergs when they leaked transclassified nuclear information to Russia. So the UAP issue, people say, well, you'll hear these, the debunkers that are part of this fraud squad, they'll say, oh, this stuff would never ever leak. Well, this kind of stuff that sits under PEDs or under the Atomic Energy Act, it is no shit. You do not leak that information unless you want to go directly to Leavenworth or worse. And we know worse has happened. So if you're an engineer on this program, or one of the waived special access programs or waived caps, or you're working on our very, very extensive foreign technology retrieval groups, and you leak that stuff, that falls under the Espionage Act. People do not do that. I know for a fact that people that have worked on the legacy program receive a call from someone out of the security infrastructure of these programs that say, remember your oath that you signed, your national security non-disclosure agreement, that if you leak this, the possible penalty is death. And oh, by the way, something bad could happen to your family. So this stuff exists. This is number one, how they have kept it away from Congress. One story that I'll tell you real quick is back around 9/11, actually it was before 9/11, the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee and Senate Armed Services Committee, they they are one of the committees that deal with the funding of our strategic nuclear weapons, our strategic and tactical nuclear weapons. So this chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee went to the White House, went to the National Security Council, and went to the Department of Energy and said, look, guys, if I'm going to be advising the Senate Armed Services Committee on how much money we need to be spending on our nation's nuclear weapons, I want to see what our nation's nuclear war plan is. He wanted to see, it was called the SIOP back in those days, Single Integrated Operational Plan. He wanted to see what was in the SIOP. And you know what happened? And the SIOP, back then it was called the SIOP, it's called OP Plan now, but the SIOP is classified as a Presidential Emergency Action Directive. It's in that classification bucket. You know what the White House, the the Department of Energy, and the National Security Council told the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee? They told him to go pound sand. They said, you do not have the legal authority to view this classified product. Period. The end. Go away. And that's what happened. So that is why this legislation is necessary, because you need to establish a White House advisory board. You need to establish an entity, a legal entity within the White House that will have access to these materials that are classified under PEDS or classified as transclassified nuclear information. That is why you need this legislation. Because if you don't, you're going to continue to have the CIA lie about it. You're going to continue to have the National Security Administration lie about it. You're going to certainly have the worst offender, the United States Air Force, and the Secretary of the Air Force, Frank Kendall, who is in my opinion, jeopardizing the national security of the United States. They're going to continue to do the same things. So this overclassification of this UAP topic, it has to be remedied. It is the use of the use of the classification authorities, or the use of classification mechanisms that are meant to safeguard nuclear material, taking that overlay and sticking that on the UAP topic. The only reason that the executive branch, and it's both Democrats and Republicans have done this. The only reason that this is stuffed in there is to hide it from Congress. So all of you in Congress that are watching this right now, staffers and lawmakers, and we know a lot of you do, this is why it is stuffed into DOE. So you cannot find it. So you in Congress do not have oversight of it. And it's an abomination of the United States, the Constitution of the United States, when they are misusing a classification authority, when they are misusing that, when they are misclassifying this stuff, and they're hiding it, this stuff that the CIA Office of Global Access, or what I say that their new TMC, or whatever their new acronym is, that they're hiding these things that they're picking up from our neighbors, not from here. They're stuffing it into the Department of Energy under transclassified nuclear information, under the bucket of restricted and previously restricted data. They are doing this, Congress, to hide this from you, because they do not want you asking questions. So this is probably exactly why Mitch McConnell killed this thing, if that is indeed true. My understanding is that it is indeed the case. So that is something that that must be remedied. I mean, period, the end. Secondly, this whole drone thing. So again, I'm talking to all of you and members of Congress. I am telling you right now, the United States Air Force, the Pentagon, they are purposely labeling these incursions as unmanned aerial systems when they know damn well a lot of these things, if not the majority of them, are actually UAP. Now, why are they doing that? In my opinion, they are doing that because the minute DOD, Air Force, or whatever says we have UAPs operating in force above our major military installations, under installations that are who are under U.S. Northcom, U.S. Northern Command, that are part of protecting the restricted Air Force, the restricted airspace above Washington. The minute they say this is UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena, oh my God, can you imagine the blowback that they're gonna get? Because all of a sudden, the press is going to be going, you're telling me UAPs are operating with impunity above our nation's most strategically important Air Force bases? Just think about that. The minute they say UAP are operating with impunity, and oh, by the way, our best electronic warfare equipment will not take these things down. And oh, by the way, these drone incursions over the Air Force Base are so bad that we are having to get one of NASA's most highly sophisticated ISR, airborne ISR platforms to sit on station on hours on end above Langley, loitering at 250 knots for hours on end because they can't figure out what these things are? Are you kidding me? So when you have Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall jeopardizing the national security of the United States, when you have the U.S. Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall jeopardizing the well-being and safety of our airmen and airwomen, why you guys in Congress aren't hauling these people up in front of a committee and putting them under oath? And mark my words, you have to put these people under oath. Otherwise, they're going to lie to your face. They've done it before. They will continue to do it. So all of you in Congress, and Nancy Mace, hopefully you watch this show. My message to you for your upcoming hearing in November, and God bless you. My hat is off to you, Congresswoman Mace, for having the courage to do this. I would subpoena, if you were me and you have the subpoena power, you have to subpoena them and you have to put them under oath. You should subpoena former director of Aero, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, and ask him why he did what he did. You should ask Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick how often he emailed with David Grush about UAP. I guarantee you Sean Kirkpatrick is lying about that. I would subpoena Secretary of Air Force Frank Kendall and ask him why he said, number one, why they're classifying these UAPs as drones. I would ask Frank Kendall, Secretary of Air Force Frank Kendall, about the continued tampering of our strategic nuclear weapons by UAP. I would ask Frank Kendall, Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall, why he thinks that this is not a national security threat. He actually went on Good Morning America and said, this is about a year or 2 years ago, went on Good Morning America and said, yes, there's stuff flying around, but it doesn't appear to be a national security threat. So yeah, folks, don't worry about it. You have to be effing kidding me. So the Secretary of the Air Force, who doesn't want to tell all of you in America and all of you in Congress that he can't control our air domains, that they do not have air domain awareness, that is a flat-out failure of the United States Air Force, period, the end. And the fact that he's lying to you in Congress, Secretary of the Air Force Frank Kendall, and that the Pentagon continues to lie to you in Congress, and the CIA continues to lie to you in Congress about their crash retrieval operations. I mean, trust me, the Office of Global Access, they're good at picking things up like loose nukes and terrorists and all of that, but they're picking up a lot of other stuff, part of foreign material acquisition, we'll say. All of you in Congress, you got to haul these people up and put them on the stand, put them under oath. I would say to you, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, you need to bring in whoever is the head of the CIA Directorate of Science and Technology. You need to put that person under oath. You need to find out who is actually in command of the Office of Global Access, or I don't have it in front of me, but their new name, and ask them what kind of recovery missions have they engaged in. You should find out the previous leadership, who I'm not going to mention this guy's name, the previous leadership of the Office of Global Access, and ask that person under oath, what kind of recovery missions of UAP did this person oversee, where they were doing this in coordination with Joint Special Operations Command and the Department of Energy. You should ask that person under oath. You should also, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, ask that individual if there is we'll just say a rogue element of Joint Special Operations Command and a rogue element of former JSOC operators who are employed by security contractors engaged in what we'll just say physical violence against people that wanted to whistleblow or threatened to whistleblow about the legacy program. Throw these people up on the stand, put them under oath. So if they lie, which they typically do lie, when you put them under oath, they do it under the penalty of perjury. That's what you got to do. We mentioned when the last UAP hearing I'm sorry, not the last one, but the first one that occurred in the House, where you had Ronald Moultrie testify. Our sources told us that apparently he did not want to be fully read into the UAP program until after the hearing, so he had plausible deniability. So again, at the end of the day, all of you in Congress, there are these drone incursions happening over our air bases and other areas that are restricted airspace, either off the coasts of our country during carrier workups. These things are flying around, endangering our men and women who are operating our nation's most expensive machines, that are causing apparently an entire flight of F-22, a squadron of F-22 fighters who are stationed at Langley to reposition elsewhere because these drones are operating with impunity, and the Air Force can't knock them out of the sky. The Air Force doesn't know what they are. The Air Force has to get NASA in to fly in one of their planes to figure out what they are. They're the Department of Defense's most classified, capable piece of handheld electronic warfare devices can't knock these things out of the sky? You've got to be kidding me. All of you in Congress should be asking, what the hell is going on? All of you in Congress need to be asking the Secretary of Air Force, what is going on with our Minuteman III squadrons where UAP are tampering with our nation's strategic nuclear deterrent? All of you need to be asking what is going on with that. I mean, it's just insane that everybody is looking the other way. Now, thank God we have people like Senator Gillibrand, Senator Rounds, Senator Rubio, Gillibrand, Rubio, Schumer. I know I'm leaving people out, but there are senators and members of Congress that are doing the right thing. Tim Burchett, who I do not agree with politically, man, my hat is off to you for doing what you're doing, and I would support you in any way, shape that I could on this topic. And this is a bipartisan topic. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. This is a topic that is directly tied to our national security. And do not let the Pentagon, the CIA, tell you otherwise. This is an existential, possibly existential threat to our national security. And they want you to think it's all baloney. Because it's not. Trust me, it's not. A few months ago, I was out at a retreat that Lou Elizondo was at in Wyoming, and myself and maybe a couple other non-civilians were there, short of some other folks. But everyone that was there at this thing, and there were a lot of people, these were all people that worked for three-letter agencies or formerly worked for three-letter agencies. And all of these folks had worked the UAP topic, either were currently working the UAP topic or had worked the UAP topic. All of them said, hands down, this is going on. These were all people that had seen these sensor data, multiple sensor data. They all said, this is going on. There may be some amount that are foreign drones, Russian or Chinese drones, but that's not what we're talking about, folks. We're talking about the part that is of non-human origin, technology of unknown origin. So when you hear, this fraud squad talking about this is all a bunch of baloney, that it's all hearsay, that's not true. That is not true. Kirk McConnell, who was at the very beginning of the trailer that we ran of James Fox's program, as he said, people with first-hand knowledge have testified under oath to members of Congress in a skiff about these classified programs. It is not hearsay. It is not secondhand information. And don't let the fraud squad convince you that that is the case, because it's not. It absolutely is not, full stop. And I suspect they know exactly what they're doing. I don't think it's out of ignorance that they're claiming that all of this is baloney, or it's all hearsay, or it's all a circle of telephone. I spoke earlier about Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who has said, who is magically, we have no idea why, but is magically still out there messaging on UAP. He doesn't even work for the Department of Defense anymore. He got a cushy job at the Department of Energy. So Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who couldn't write a basic fifth grade scientific analysis, is out working for DOE on our dime, by the way. He's working for DOE under our dime, and he's out there messaging on this, and he's going to be on a television series in January. And I don't think this is a YouTube television series. I think this is something on a network. But he's going to be out there debunking again. And as I mentioned, somebody needs to FOIA the communications between Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and David Grush. Because I'm telling you right now, Sean Kirkpatrick is not being truthful with you. He's not being truthful with all of you in Congress. And to Senator Gillibrand, who we are very big fans of, I would encourage you during your hearing to put under oath, under subpoena, not only the current Aero director, but Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. You've got to get Sean Kirkpatrick to sit at the hearing under oath. He has to be under oath. That is the only way you're going to get the truth. So, that has got to happen. So we've, folks in Congress, you got to do your jobs. We elect you to represent all of us. And when you've got this stuff where the executive branch is giving you the middle finger and saying, we don't care about your constitutionally mandated authority of oversight of the executive branch. You guys have to exert your power. This is your power, members of Congress. Doesn't matter what party you are in. This is power given to you by the Constitution of the United States. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So you have to do this. You can't let this go unanswered. It is high time you do it. And I know a bunch of you are doing your best to get this into the sunlight. And my hat is off to you. Doesn't matter what political party you are. If you're doing good work on this, I am behind you. because this is bigger than any political party. It is bigger than any branch in government. It is bigger than any group of 50 senior executive service level people that have decided to make this decision for all of us. This is bigger than the C-suite of Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, BAE, and others who have decided we're going to ride this gravy train and not tell the American public about it. It is a travesty of American justice that this is going on. And I'm going to close on this, Congress. All of you in Congress that are watching this. You have a problem. And this is your problem that you have got to figure out how to address. You have an Inspector General legal system that is corrupt. It exists in the Department of Defense primarily, the DoD IG. So when you have members of Congress, when you have the Inspector General of the Pentagon, the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, who in one breath says, oh, by the way, any whistleblowers, come in and tell us what you know, and we're not going to, and anything you do come and disclose is going to be a protected disclosure. But then as soon as that guy or girl's out of the door, the DoD IG goes and leaks that information to the press? You've got to be kidding me. The DoD IG, when people go in and talk to them about UAP under a protected disclosure, when they file a PPD-19, they go and they leak that to the press. Now you tell me how that is fair. You tell me how that is protecting government whistleblowers. It's not. And all of you in Congress, you want to know why the Department of Defense Inspector General is doing this? It's a message. It's a message to whistleblowers. While we may talk a good game and say, if you see a government fraud, waste, or abuse, come in and talk to us. But what they're really saying, members of Congress, what they're really saying to these government whistleblowers is if you come in to the Department of Defense Inspector General and you testify to us, guess what we're going to do? We're going to leak your information. Guess what that's going to do? That's going to probably jeopardize your security clearance. Guess what that's going to do? That's going to jeopardize your way of living. Guess what that's going to do? That's going to probably ensure that you are unemployed and you can't put food on the table. That's the kind of stuff, members of Congress, that the Pentagon is up to. That is the kind of un-American behavior that the Pentagon is up to. That is the kind of behavior that our intelligence community is up to. And only you in Congress can fix this. You guys have to do this. It doesn't matter if it's your party is in the White House or not. This transcends your president, whoever it may be, if you're Republican or Democrat at whatever period of time. You got to stand up to the executive branch because that's what the Constitution mandates. And again, if you don't use your power, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So get the UAP Disclosure Act passed. Subpoena the folks that I spoke about for the UAP hearing in November. It's about time, because we are all tired of it. It's time to put an end to all of this baloney.